Call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Education for School District number 40 at 6 p.m. on Monday, October 26, 2020 at the Coolidge Professional Development Room. Can I have a roll call?
Audrey Adamson. Here. Justin Anderson.
Present.
Sangeeta Rayapati.
Here.
Kate Schaefer.
Here.
Maria Estragero. Here. Andrew Gayer.
Here.
Aaron Wilson-Smith. Here.
And we stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the next order is approval of the minutes. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the open session of the regular meeting of the Board of Education on October 12th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, can I have a roll call, please?
Justin Anderson.
Aye.
Kate Schaefer.
Aye.
Maria Estragero. Aye. Andrew Gayer.
Aye.
Aaron Wilson-Smith. Aye. Audrey Adamson. Aye. Sangeeta Rayapati.
Aye.
Okay, we have no communication or public comment. Correct. Right. So now we need to move to the public hearing for the driver's education waiver.
Good evening, everyone. As you know, oh, sorry.
Hold on, I might have to, I think I have to open the hearing.
You want us to do that after you speak?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Just to give you a little bit on it, as you know, we have a driver's ed range attached to Moline High School. We end up, we're doing this so that every 5 years, so that we can make a waiver to the state, so we can end up utilizing the driver's ed range. And we're gonna have a testimony today that will end up explaining more about how that's beneficial to our students and families.
So we will now begin the hearing for the driver's education waiver. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the driver's education waiver?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. My name is Kevin Gorgel. I'm Department Chair for Driver Education, Health, and Physical Education at Moline High School. Continue?
Yeah.
Okay. First off, the facility that we have is one of only about 5 or 6 closed course teaching facilities in the state of Illinois. So in that respect, it's tremendous for our students to be able to be in a facility like that, to work on various skills and drills and obtain some basic fundamental skills before they go out into the roads and highways and byways and such. With the winter coming, defensive driving, winter skill driving, things like that we probably wouldn't want to do out on the streets. Parallel parking in front of Dr. Savage's house, probably not one of the prime places to do it, but we have plenty of spaces out there to do it, okay? We currently are able to serve approximately 290 students during the school year, with about another 80 to 85 during the summer, for a total of around 370. That is with the range in use. Back in 2008 and 2009, we had that range taken from us for 1 year, and I can't remember all the circumstances, but the number of students we were able to teach was basically cut in half. So it was not very cost effective. We were not able to reach the number of students that we need to. Currently, we charge $100 for driver education, $225, I believe, in the summer, and that has held steady for many years. Currently, Skiles private driving school is in the $450 to $500 range. And so that's a hardship for a lot of our families, and especially since we don't bus, that driver's license for these students, for various reasons, is very, very important. So again, I'm asking the board to hopefully apply for that 5-year waiver, so we are able to teach as many students as we can and meet the needs of our families of the district.
there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the driver's education waiver? Is there anyone who wishes to speak neither for nor against the driver's education waiver, but wishes to offer additional information? Okay, we'll conclude the hearing. Thank you, Mr. Borgo.
You're welcome.
Now we have a public hearing for e-learning in lieu of emergency days verification.
Before we go into this, the only clarification I would give to this doesn't replace our current remote learning and return to learning plan. This is just simply the formal process so that it's a 3-year verification that if you ever wanted to, in a post-pandemic situation, utilize an e-learning day instead of an emergency day, say be it for snow, the district would be set up so that we could formally do that should the district choose to proceed.
So we'll now begin hearing for the e-learning waiver. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the e-learning waiver? Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the e-learning in lieu of emergency day verification? Is there anyone who wishes to speak neither for nor against the e-learning in lieu of emergency day verification, but wishes to offer additional information? Okay. We'll close that hearing. Well, now I have to go back to Dr. DeBain, transitional math course and textbook update.
Yes, so I have Mr. Chris Moore, our assistant principal from Moline High School here. I'm trying to go into a little bit, but the state now has a requirement in for a transitional math course. The nice part to this is that for seniors who to bridge into college, so by completing it, they can get community college credit. But to be perfectly honest with you, there's not too many options in which way you can go because it's a state mandate. I'm going to let Mr. Moore speak more to it.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. In compliance with the state law requirement through the Post-Secondary Workforce Readiness Act, we have had our teacher Donna Lawrence and Department Chair Jeff Weller go to training about transitional math and the portability. We've chosen, there are 3 choices about which transitional math you can do. We're going to go with quantitative, it's called quantitative literacy and statistics. And for the very reason that Dr. DeBain mentioned it. A student who shows proficiency, so if they get a C or higher in that class, they're automatically able to go to 101 math level at the community high. There's no remedial math needed there. And so we think that's a beneficial transition. This is for certain students. This is students who've had 3 years of math, they've had their 3 credits of, or 3 years, pardon me, of math already. This is for juniors in their 2nd semester or seniors in either semester, just for the reason that they mentioned. We just want to give another pathway to make sure that we can guarantee that those kids that are leaving our high school, that are going to go to the community college or other institutions, they'd be able to start at those 101 math class levels. So that's what we're excited about. It's not just compliance, it's a real big opportunity this is providing us to assure that for a good chunk of our population.
A couple questions on that. Sounds good. One, is it open to all students that are 2nd semester, junior year, and senior year, or do they have to have a certain GPA or grade level along the way? Because some are also in remedial while in high school, and that would do them a potential disservice to not have them get the extra help they need in college. So how do they go about qualifying for it?
There are several factors that they want to hit a certain range of student. For example, if you've already tested on the active placer for Blackout College, you don't need this class. We're not going to go there. If you have, they recommend 6 or 7 factors that if a student has 2 or more of them, that they don't take this transitional math. And so it really does target those students who are within the range of they've been in remedial math throughout their high school, or they've been in other general math classes but have struggled. And so we're going to go with those state, recommendations for who we place in those classes so that, no one will be passed up. Like they can, they can go into transitional math, even from those types of classes.
Thank you.
So that is the recommendation that if they're particularly junior, they're just thinking about, or it's been talked about a counselor about this as an option, that they would, based on the community college they're interested in, go and take those exams, the AccuPlacer now, and like laptop for that, to sort of make that determination ahead of time, to make sure, especially if they're on that kind of borderline based off of their performance so far.
Yeah, that's one factor. So they talk about grade point average, they talk about grades that you had passed in Algebra 2 or passed Algebra 2. So that could definitely be one thing that we do. We do have many students take, for example, the AccuPlacer, so that we can, for dual credit, for many reasons, so that we can work on their placement. But there are even other ones if a student hasn't taken the AccuPlacer that we can pretty much make sure that we guide them into transitional math. And, but yes, we could have as an extra. There are just certain students that we have good indications outside of that, but they'll probably need that transition.
Okay, well, thank you.
Absolutely.
So I have the text with me here today. It's going to start the 30-day public viewing. I will have it at Allendale. Due to the pandemic, best practice is to call ahead for the public and make an appointment so we can get, just keeping everything safe as you can imagine. Yeah.
Do they have, the publisher, are they making that available for things like this digitally for individuals to look at as well? So they don't have to go to Alabama to look at it, but that we could do viewing digitally?
They have, no,
Okay.
they have not. That's really interesting. They haven't opened it up like that. And then I'm sure there's like a personal interest or.
Yeah. I think you can copyright issue.
Yeah.
I'm just saying limited coded ones, like for any of the bills that I can get coded when they have access to the things that they might.
But we won't have a copy here.
Okay.
We'll gladly set up a point for people to view. What we're currently going through right now, because this is going to be staying with us, is we're going through and it's a subscription system that's pretty reasonable. As most textbooks now are moving into a subscription-based system. So we're vetting through a multi-year subscription, and then after 30 days, we'll have a recommendation to the board.
I have a question. It's based on the numbers of students you've identified that could make use of this kind of course. Are we looking at any personnel needs, or are you planning to shift around people's loads?
Sangeetha, it's an internal shift. It wouldn't require additional personnel.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions?
Or maybe comment.
Huh?
I have a comment. I can only say that as the person, as a student who would have needed this, honestly, because I had to take under 100 courses when I went to college, but I like the idea of them getting that support in high school instead of being in personal college where they might still be struggling with these concepts. And
We'll have a facilities presentation by Dr. Savage.
All right, thank you, everybody. I'm going to present some information regarding our Aspire program. If you remember, Aspire is the Alternative Student Programs for Individualized and Remote Education. Thank you, Dr. DeBain, for that great acronym. If you recall, our high school administrators presented on the Aspire program in August. And along with that presentation came associated timelines for the program. So that's what this presentation will focus on this evening. So the purpose of the presentation is to respond to a board member's request to research options for transitioning the Aspire program, which is the current Coolidge program, out of the Coolidge facility. Possible acceleration of timeline to renovate the A wing of Moline High School and move Aspire to that location for more equitable facilities and better access to academic and social emotional supports, or consider other temporary locations. And also to gain guidance and direction from the Board of Education on how they would like us to proceed. So in this presentation, I have the following items for your review. Our PACE goal alignment to this work, rationale for the original timeline to move the Aspire program, an initial conceptual snapshot of how the A wing at Moline High School could be renovated to accommodate the Aspire program. And again, that's the current program located here at Coolidge. by Leggett Architecture. A generalized cost analysis for renovating the A wing by Russell Construction. Revised cost of a previous bid to replace all the windows at Coolidge, I believe also from Russell, is that correct? And a proposed timeline for the PACE goal that we have this year under E for environment. Excuse me, review and revise the 10-year strategic facilities plan, administrative procedures, and school handbooks where student equity can be improved. So the goals associated with this work, as you recall last year under E for environment, we sought to define and enhance alternative educational experiences and services by better articulating pathways to and from sending schools and by better aligning course curriculum and instructional delivery. We made some great headway on that work last year. We are still doing that work, if you will. COVID slowed us down, but we are still making progress on those goals. And this year, again, 2 goals under E for environment. Pilot year 1 of the Aspire program, which you heard about again at the beginning of the year from Mr. Moore, Ms. Sanders, and Mr. Bullock. At Coolidge, and acknowledge diverse pathways to diploma attainment. And then updating the 10-year facilities plan that I previously mentioned. These are the timelines that were presented in the original Aspire presentation that you had back in August from the high school team. And I specifically highlighted in a bold maroon color the goal that was originally associated to the year 2022-23 to move the Aspire program to MHS again for equitable facilities and access to curriculum and social emotional learning supports. Just as a reminder of those timelines from the original presentation. So as we take a look at what a conceptual image would look like, we've got some pictures for you here. And I would like to say that these are just very initial conceptual program ideas. Depending on how the Board of Education would like us to proceed, we would engage a committee of stakeholders to drill down better into some more specific uses to better meet program needs. So again, just an initial conceptual look. So this is an idea of what the entrance would look like. Again, a separate entrance at Moline High School. This is the pool entrance doors currently. And we would be looking at creating a new facade out front and specializing that entrance for that program specifically. To give you a better idea of where we are talking about, you can see the shaded area or the highlighted area in red. Again, that is the A wing of Moline High School in the front of the building. The pool is there on the far right of the image there on the screen, and you can see the A wing highlighted there in red. Just as an overview design so you can get your bearings. And then taking a look at, again, what an initial conceptual renovation would look like. We're really seeking classroom spaces. That's what we're seeking here. And we would be looking at remodeling the current classroom areas, or the current spaces, I should say, that are there, dividing those larger spaces that are currently there into smaller classrooms for accommodating more students. What you see here are just ideas, and what you see here are possibilities for the program for growth in the future. The design here and the costs associated really present a doing it right approach. From renovating the locker rooms that would remain for use for athletics and other programs, again, to creating multiple classroom spaces for students, for creating a cafeteria space for students to be able to have a proper place to sit down and eat their breakfast and lunch. You're also looking at, in the blue shaded area, a new front office entry near the pool entrance doors that would create space for the principal, administrative assistant, counselors, and other folks. And also some renovated spaces to include student use areas, an area for staff, workroom, conference room, and things of that nature. So really, it's just making that usable space more classroom friendly and more program friendly. Again, I cannot reiterate enough that this is number one, a do it right approach. One school of thought is if we're going to get in there and renovate the A wing, to do it in a way so that we don't need to come back to that wing, and that it could be usable in the future for different purposes. You can see the East Gym remains. You can see that this idea would include renovating the locker rooms there by the East Gym, which are screaming for some love, if you know what I'm saying. And also, it's a massive space there. So there's a possibility of creating some multi-purpose space for student and program use there as well. Again, there are other ideas to this project that would not include all encompassing renovations. It just comes down to the wishes of the Board of Education. So again, just kind of an overall conceptual idea of what renovations could look like moving forward. Looking at an initial cost analysis, the way that it was initially presented, renovating the locker rooms, creating cafeteria space, creating multi-purpose space, creating office space and staff space and student space. For the do it right approach, the ballpark estimate is 2.7 million. That being said, there are opportunities to bring the program into that area for a lesser cost by not doing some of the components of the construction, or excuse me, the renovation, such as the locker rooms. They certainly can continue to function in the state that they're in, not adding a separate cafeteria space, and so on and so forth. That would bring the project down if the board chose to move forward, getting the kids in the renovated classroom space at a more, at a lesser number, and bringing them in, not doing some of those other items in the proposed renovation plan. And taking a look at the revised bid to replace all of the windows at Coolidge comes in right at 1 million. And so I know that was also a request from some members of the Board of Education to take a look at what those costs would be too, just as a point of reference. As we're talking about this, I wanted to make sure that I was able to present the full picture of facilities, projects, our current obligations, and our current timelines. As you know, we are currently focusing on a number of projects, including HVAC at Moline High School, with an estimated completion time of next summer. Included in these $22 million 1% bonds, we completed the Franklin renovation. We completed the Bartlett Performing Arts Center. We still have projects involved with LED lighting, estimated completion next summer. And we've got parking lot projects that were completed. And we are still in the middle of a renovation from, again, at Moline High School, our beautiful new PE facility. We were able to showcase phase 1 today. Phase 2 slated to continue at the end, or excuse me, to be completed at the end of this calendar year, December 2020. Coming back to the original timeline for the Aspire program, when that timeline was originally presented to the Board of Education, we really didn't have extra information built into that timeline to explain the rationale. So I wanted to make sure that you had that here. So currently in this school year, again, work that is currently in progress, HVAC at Moline High School completed next summer. PE facility at Moline High School completed this December. Next school year, we also have projects slated. So this is the school year 2021, 2022. Working through the summer for HVAC. And initially then, that timeline indicated that the fall of 2021 was the original projected timeline to begin renovating the A wing. And the future school year, 2022-23, in August, was the original projected completion of A wing renovation and current Coolidge program transitioning to that area. So just wanted to provide the rationale of why that school year was chosen and what's happening in between those years in that time frame. Regarding the timeline for the 10-year district strategic facilities plan, again, our PACE goal is there. Here's the timeline that we have in place. Next month, November and December, we would work on establishing the district strategic facilities planning committee. And that would be comprised of staff, parents, and community members. That committee would be led by Mr. Smith, our Director of Facilities. And I've asked Dr. Pribble to be our cabinet representative on that committee. In January, two things would happen. The committee would begin meeting once a month virtually and continue meeting once a month through the second semester through May or as needed. And also in January, we would be administering an all stakeholder survey, a survey that would go out to all staff, all parents in the district, and community members to gain some new perspectives, insights, ideas, and opinions about which projects we should be looking at in our district, how those projects should be prioritized, and learning better about what the stakeholders feel are our needs in our district. With the goal of presenting that 10-year facilities plan, again revised. The current plan still has projects in motion, but revising it with a new set of eyes, I guess you could say. My goal would be to present that plan to you then at the end of the second semester in June. So that's the timeline for the facilities plan that I wanted to make sure that you had this evening. Also wanted to bring to the board's attention some other projects and sorting through this research and gaining a historical perspective and speaking to members that have been here longer than I and recalling other projects that have been on the table. So these projects were previously emerged from community input prior to the passage of the Rock Island County 1% sales tax. Air conditioning for the remaining buildings, we have half done. Half the buildings are finished, and so it would be for the other half with a cost of approximately $35 a square foot. Enhanced security for our school entrances. We have made great strides in our safety and security, but this would be enhanced. Upgrades to the high school pool and upgrades to Browning Field. So those were projects that previously emerged from community conversations around the passing of the 1% sales tax. And really lastly, these are the three questions, if you will, for board discussion tonight. Is transitioning the Aspire program from Coolidge to the high school the next Board of Education priority? And if so, what is an acceptable timeline? If yes, again, the district leadership would proceed with a committee of stakeholders to guide and develop the specifics of those spaces in a wing to better meet the needs of the students in the program and the learning environment that would take place there. Again, what you saw was just a very conceptual idea, and we want to make sure that if we're moving forward, that we have the right folks at the table so that we've got all those little spaces thought through based on student and program needs, and also how the building would utilize the other spaces in a wing and continue to utilize those spaces. Is the proposed process and timeline for the facilities committee acceptable, with the end goal of presenting the revised 10-year plan in late spring, early summer? And lastly, what is the vision for future district use of the Coolidge facility? And should that be something that would be flushed through the facility committee? So that is the end of the presentation. I will turn it back to these discussion areas and turn it over to the Board of Education for discussion.
Has a question? That's good.
Other than the Aspire program right now in Coolidge, what else do we utilize the rest of this massive building for that would still be used if that program moved?
People turn it over to Mr. Moore, he probably has the best idea how that space is being currently
Percentage-wise, how
used.
many students are moving? Is it a whole floor moving? We already don't use one or two of the floors in the building for our own.
Are you talking about
No, this
Coolidge?
building,
though,
Oh,
Yeah. two.
Yeah, the ROE would still be here. And then, maintenance and facilities would still be here for the short term.
District support services are also on the
Yes.
second floor with the ROE.
Okay. District support service.
so be about 100 students.
I have one other question, and I'll let others ask while I gather some thoughts. The different things that we've looked at, last time when we decided to do a big project or a renovation, we decided to do the P facility, and we had a long conversation about another thing at the high school with all the other buildings around the district needing stuff. Why do we feel that why does the administration, being we, feel that this is the next right thing with all those other things still there? And we've already heard from the community over and over and over, really, another thing at the high school with all the elementaries needing stuff, space and classrooms already, we're looking at adding on, we've talked to second floors, we've talked, just in brainstorming, talked to all sorts of stuff. Why another thing at the high school next?
Well, I would say that the projection for moving the students was not until 2022, 23, with the notion that other things would be happening in between time. And that was just a timeline that we presented to the Board of Education in August. But certainly that is up for Board of Education discussion and guidance. And really that's why we're here, is to find out what is the, what are the wishes of the board in terms of how should these projects be fleshed out? And we were asked to bring that forward to the board today.
One tiny follow-up question. Finances. It's there, but how much leeway do we have if we agree to something that's 2.7 million for just example that was shown? What other leeway do we have? How long does that tie us up, commit us to all these other ones that are also on the table to be considered?
First, until the board gives us some guidance, I can't really answer that question because I could say it's not, put it in perspective, a $22 million bond sale or a $14 million bond sale. This is a very manageable project. So until the board gives us some direction, I then come back with financing options and various different things like this. That is not a direct answer, but that gives you the thought process of where we're at.
Okay.
Okay, hey, this is Andy. I was one of the ones that very much pushed to bring this to the forefront. For a couple of reasons. First, I think first and foremost is that Coolidge is in terrible shape. I mean, anybody who has walked around that building can tell you that it's in bad shape. That's the first and foremost. These kids that go to this building are our most vulnerable kids. And we have an opportunity, with the alternative school to pull these kids up. And I think the facility needs to match our commitment to these kids. We really can do great things with helping these kids. And second, kind of from a bigger picture community aspect, Coolidge is an eyesore. The avenue needs some help, and we don't. Yeah, we're members of the Board of Education, but we also live in this community. We're also part of this community. It's not school taxpayers, it's not city taxpayers. We're one taxpayer. So I really think that this is a very much worthwhile project. I think we should move forward with the accelerated timeline. But I also have some thoughts on whether construction management format is the best way to go for this. There's other, other options such as a general contractor or a design build that could be used. Not necessarily convinced that construction management is the way to go on this.
One point that I just want to make sure that the timeline that was presented, the 22-23 academic year, to have the kids be able to move into that. Technically, Andy, I just don't want to make sure that I'm not miscommunicating. That timeline of the kids moving in August of 2022, let's say, isn't necessarily accelerated. It really is the timeline that was presented in August. And so through my research and investigating if the project could be accelerated, it's my position that we couldn't accelerate it any sooner unless other projects halted. So that would be a point of discussion for the Board of Education. I just wanted to make sure that I spoke clearly on that, Andy.
Andy, I agree. It is nice.
Why would other projects have to be halted?
This is Dave McDermott. I don't know that halted is in place, but we're still working on, the second phase 2 of the air condition. We're still working on the PE facility. That stuff isn't going to be completed until really the end of next summer. And with such a tight timeline of really, non-COVID conditions, we've really just done construction in summers. And this next summer is all getting eaten up at the high school. It would aid with air conditioning stuff that we could plan for that would be beneficial if this project was chosen. There'd be some economies of scale. But in reality, the workload that the district has right now and has overcome for the last 2 years is the most we've ever done in our history. So we're struggling to get through this successfully. So that's not intended to halt it. We just don't have any more capacity to add any other bigger projects at this time. So that's really why next summer is off the table from that perspective, because there's a lot to get done still to complete the HVAC project. And then, we got some LED lightings at all the elementaries that hasn't even started as part of the $22 million 1% sales. So that's the intention of that, the timeline. The internal capacity just isn't there.
But isn't that what we hire Russell for? Isn't that the construction manager's responsibility to handle the project? Otherwise, you just have foremans.
Yeah, I would say you're right, but the amount of detail that we have intertwined with Russell or a construction manager is extremely time consuming and detailed. We're not doing the everyday, but the amount of meetings you go to, the correspondence that you do go and the alignment, yeah. Can we do a design phase of the next project? Yeah, but to get completion for the summer would be very, 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 very difficult, in my opinion, but we could explore that if that's the board's wishes.
I have a question.
Real quick, tiny ones. One, Andy, I agree with what you stated. Do I understand that then, that this is in your interest, maybe an intent towards phasing away from Coolidge as the district?
Yeah, I think we need to, the sooner we can do it, the better. Everybody in that room has walked through this place.
Building, there's not only the Aspire, I can't remember the name of it, forgive me, there's also the junior high program. What happens to those students?
It's a classroom, and there would be a classroom dedicated
On
to
that list, kind of what you
safe
showed.
schools, correct?
One of those rooms.
Yes.
Okay, so we're not moving that one group and leaving the other. All the
Right.
students would make the move if this was done.
Correct.
I'm good.
Okay, 3 thoughts and then just one question. So I have no interest in putting money into this building to then leave it. I just no, it's just a big no for me. Like I am with Andy, this is our most vulnerable population. I want best practice says having them close to their environment and a way to easily move back in is the best thing to do for our at-risk kids. I totally get that if we're gonna do it right. Like I get it. Like, it's just like when we had issues with Franklin, it wasn't like patch it and then see what happens later. But I really want to get these kids out of here. I just really think that is the best thing for our students. I think that's the lens we should always be looking through, is what is best for our students. And Dave, I have a question, and forgive me if this is a dumb question. So, we're doing the LED lighting correctly? We have to keep doing that. We couldn't shift that money to start helping with the air conditioning at the elementary.
I would say legally, we sold bonds and we told them to protect the uses for them.
Okay, that's
If you came off of that, there would be some ramifications. I don't want you to think it's huge. I don't even know the answer officially to that, but we made a commitment and we sold the bonds. And in that project, we listed LED, parking lot, Franklin, Performing Arts Center. I think there's a way to fund a future project like this that we should not go against that. And the other thing I would say is, if you did see LED lighting in the new PE facility or even the Performing Arts, it's a game changer, you know, for lights and conserving energy.
I have a question.
Okay, say Gabe to go.
Yeah, so I have, well, it's actually two things. Under the third bullet point, under questions for Board of Education discussion, the vision for the future district use. Because Coolidge is a historic building, I think we shouldn't undertake any direction here until we understand what the implications are for a building like it. I think there's people we have to talk to ascertain that, because I wouldn't want us to decide to do something and then have to walk backwards and completely change things and then maybe put the decision in question in the first place. So that's one of my concerns, is because of its age and its significance, we should probably check on that. And number two, I agree that students should always be our focus, and both the elementary students who have to suffer through unair conditioned, super hot climate change induced summers, early fall, they're also at risk because of that learning environment. So my goal would be to help both of these populations, because the need is very great for both. So I'm wondering if the administration has considered just simply finding a different space for 100 students to be housed in, to be educated in for the near future, so that their learning environment changes sooner. I do understand that really accelerating a timeline to early January 2021 is just a few months earlier than you would have started according to the original pace or original Aspire timeline. But I don't think it bars us from thinking about whether there is a space to put students that's more conducive to learning than the current space.
Absolutely 100. This is Andy again. I completely agree with Sangeeta. I'm not like married to the idea that we have to build something right this second, but if we need to get these kids out of the environment that they're in. That's the underlying, the main point is that these kids are in an environment that is not suitable to learning.
Can I just say something real quick? But correct me if I'm wrong, it would be very difficult to continue some of our programs if we moved them far enough away from the high school that they wouldn't have access to certain things at the high school, am I correct?
That's a current challenge. If I may, I'm sorry. One of the current challenges is the fact that we are separate from the high school. One of the benefits of having them, all of our students all of our high school students at the high school, is that we could more easily transition them in part of their day, access to electives and other resources.
So if we were to say, move them to, a different location. I don't even want to name the school because I don't want anybody upset with me, but if we were to move them to a different school, that would cause more problems than just getting them
Temporarily.
temporarily. So if we were to like,
Well, Kate, I wasn't suggesting a different school. I mean, when we had the Franklin issue, I believe we used insurance money to help pay for rent at a different facility, right?
that's what I'm trying to say. If we were to rent a facility farther away from the high school, that would not be that would cause more
Right.
problems.
So I don't know what kind of space we really would have. I just didn't know if that had been considered, just finding some other place for 100 students to be.
We did consider it, and I just, as from a historical perspective, I was not here for the Franklin project, but I learned that renting a space was quite costly. What was the cost of that?
I think that cost was, and we wouldn't need that big, obviously, because there was 300 kids. But that facility was almost to the nature of $60,000 a month. You know, costly. I'm not suggesting we need that big of a space.
Dave, can you remind me how much of that was covered by insurance? I couldn't remember.
100%,
Yeah, that's what I
100%.
thought. That's why it was possible. I fully understand that. I just wanted to just to see if we had talked about an alternative space.
One of the things in alternative spaces is it has to be set up for school code. So we got lucky with the IBM building because the college was in there before we got there and it was set up. So like finding stuff that is fire alarm ready and stuff that's already there, that's been a school, you could have expense bringing in a lease space up to the cost of that, what it takes to be a school.
Okay, that's helpful information. Thank you.
Audrey, so just to get the scope of some of the other projects then, so I know it's a $35 per square foot, and I remember we got the packet last year that really broke down some of our deferred maintenance and then the other wish list costs. What would be the cost for the air conditioning as we're looking at equity in terms of the elementary schools and all of that? Do we have I know it would change based off of.
Isn't it about $1 million a school?
Yeah.
So if you just look at Jane Addams, Butterworth and Jefferson, you can do those for about $3 million. And I think we can air condition the rest of the district for about $9 million.
That's $9 million to get everything else. Okay. I'm just thinking of where we have the possibility. So I guess when I look at it as well, I think doing it right is good and not rushing into it. So I agree wanting to move people, but at the same time, although the situation I think is critical, I don't know how I say the word, like dire, is it where we need to move them right away, or do we take our time and do this project and do it well and we have that next year and then we have this facility that is set up really intentionally for this population. But then I understand then, and I don't know in terms of groups of talking to the students and the parents that are in this building and the staff that work in it more recently to say how dire is that situation of getting out of this space to move into that new space. Because I think the initial timeline looked like we would hopefully meet our needs, and then we would also be able to see based off of the timeline for the facilities committee to know kind of what did that look like, where did that fall, even in those sorts of things, and maybe guide some of the decisions past the initial planning before that build would start in that fall of 2021. So I guess that's just my thoughts, not knowing, getting that feedback of what is the sense of urgency of the people that are participating in this program right now, not just us, but the ones that are in here every day and the ones that will be in whatever this new facility is in the future.
If we were to move forward with the request to do some more studying and learning, what level of commitment and dollar-wise and time would that put us into if it came back and it was like, nah, let's change course?
Question. I understand and I appreciate all this because I think there's serious discussions that need to be done, which we will. Is there like an either or, like either if, because there's two very important things here. This, of course, I understand from the Roughly School District, so I've been in here a couple of times over, more than a couple, but I understand also the need for the AC in the schools is very important in the other elementary schools. I just want to make sure that both are important, you know, and I want to make sure if we do one, will we be able to do the other, or how long will that take, you know? Because the community, like you said, they're, another thing at the high school, they're gonna say, you know, there's gonna be a lot of that. You know, I just want to make sure, you know, we have these real discussions and try to do what's best for the community with kids as well, students here.
Would there be a cost to go forward and have these studies and get some more information and learn, or just some time invested?
I think, you know, if it's the wish of the board, we could flush a few of these out and give you more estimates if you give us some guidance to what you want. If you want a less costly option at the high school, we could certainly do that. You know, we can review and try to study for a short term, you know, rental for something in between. You know, that's going to be challenging with all the things we've said, but we could, we're looking for some direction and meet the needs of the board because we all understand there's needs. It's putting that next priority first is the tough one. And we've been through it before, we'll get through it again. But that's the reality is if you think we're doing something right, we'll proceed. If you want us to do something else, we'll go with that. And I don't mean to speak for the superintendent, but yeah, it's difficult.
Dave, can I say, I'm sorry, guys, I don't have a hand raised that Kate can see. I'll make it quick. I definitely need the cost of the air conditioning, the elementary schools, to weigh against the investment in Coolidge as well, not against, actually to weigh with an investment in moving Aspire, et cetera, and renovation. And I also think, like I said, we need to understand what doing anything at a historic building implies for us cost-wise. That's all.
I mean, sorry.
That was my point, the cost, you know, if we could do both, that'd be great, but try to get that cost of what would it cost for AC and what would it cost? Right now, you gave us the 2.5, but like you said, there's things that we could, you know, not do and do.
And to be clear, really, this information is really just associated with moving the students. I fully understand it's a much larger discussion about what to do with the building itself and the other inhabitants that would still be in the building. So that's why I suggested that the rest of that would be flushed out to the facilities committee. So time to investigate the historical rules associated with the building and what those options are. So I want to make sure that, in my mind, it's two separate things. Taking care of the students is one thing, and taking care of the actual structure is another that I would put secondary to taking care of the students. So I think what we're looking for is guidance as to is the timeline still acceptable, that if the board wants us to move forward with this, where we would start renovating next August or so and take the time to do that. And it would be my guess that the plans for this actual facility would be fleshed out through that committee next semester. That's how, you know, I have thought through it.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Dr. Savage. Those are two separate issues. What to do with the building, the Coolidge building itself. I mean, I would prefer that we sell it, get rid of it to a developer, but you know, I think that's something that needs to be flushed out.
I agree they're two separate issues, but at the same time, they tie in. If we move all our students out,
We still have people here.
we have people, but not students.
Right, but.
Yeah, but I mean, the ROE probably leases space from us. So, I mean.
For guidance at this point.
Yeah.
We need
But I
to.
think one project accelerates the need to address another. That's just me. I'm done until you take a straw poll.
Real quick, okay, so, you're asking for guidance. Here would be my desire. My desire is you have given us the just case, we get all bells and whistles. Then you have, you know, we could get them in there, but it wouldn't be all the bells and whistles. I'd like to see that estimate instead of just, yes, that would be my guidance. And then I'm gonna be the girl who's gonna go out on the ledge. I think before we decide to air condition the elementaries, there needs to be a discussion
on what buildings we are moving forward with.
And that would be what, bring us.
Yes, that's, I was gonna say, like, we
Yes.
talk about the 9 elementaries, but let's make sure we have that very realistic conversation.
Right.
That would,
That's
that is my.
And this is where, sorry, it's Andy again. And this is where it seems like we are meandering from one, capital project to another. I mean, this is where we need that improvement plan. We can't be doing this all the time, like from one crisis to the next. We need a facilities plan. My preference would be that we start rolling on the Coolidge thing, moving the alternative program. I don't think that a start date of next August is unreasonable. I mean, we just need a plan, and we need to move it forward. But we also need to get going on this 10-year study. I mean, I think when we did those, I think we keep going back to those forums that we had, but I think a lot of people didn't quite understand the condition that some of our buildings are in, or the thought of what we're going to do with the elementary school. So those things need to be flushed out. And I think through a 10-year facilities plan, we can do that.
I'm going to suggest yes. Knowing the conditions of the buildings, all the different requests, all the different needs. Coolidge is in by far the worst shape structurally. Everything else involved, holes, leaky windows, broken windows, everything everywhere. I'm okay to move forward and learn what it would be to put this in action and come back with a do it right idea.
Audrey.
So same thing, I agree. I think the timeline that was presented initially is good enough. Trying to rush that or try to double up on projects that are happening over the course of next summer and trying to do that, but wait, and then hopefully this coincides with getting some good feedback from an established facilities committee that allows us to do that. I think as it takes about what we do with the students in the meantime, I would like to hear always the feedback from the staff and the students and families that are here right now. What is the urgency of moving that, or is this something where we can do some other things over the course of the next year to make this as equitable as possible environment for them until the new facility comes into place. So and then of course just starting to investigate the air conditioning, security issues, other things like that. But I think a lot of those will also come up in that facilities committee, and I look forward to kind of seeing how that develops.
One quick promise, it's my last one.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges we see from them being separate?
I think the biggest one is access to services and to educational opportunities. We have students that, we just have some students that basically need to be in an alternative environment for part of the day, or students that want to work towards that. That would also be an incentive for students. Perhaps, eating in the cafeteria with everyone else, if, those kinds of things, a good program has a set of goals for students to work towards. And so that's part of it. Also, we have counselors coming over, back and forth here to provide services to our most vulnerable students. And so, just those kinds of things.
Thank you.
So your thoughts, do we move forward with finding more information?
Yes, because I mean, there's just that says to me there's a lack of equity. They need the services, they need to be in there. Any program will tell you, I completely agree with them. Having goals for students to meet like that is very good for their success. And I want to see an equitable process we discussed and move forward.
Brianna, are you going to go forward with looking into this?
Absolutely.
Sangeeta,
Yeah,
straw poll, are you going forward to find out more information?
well, yeah, but I think that the superintendent and her staff really want more than a, yes, find more information. They want to know if they're supposed to accelerate or not. And I actually think that the thing that should be accelerated is the 10-year facilities plan. That is going to give us the best guidance for strategic moves with regard to capital projects. That is not to say that I do not disagree that these students need to be taken care of. I think that I've made that pretty clear. But I think it's actually the umbrella 10-year plan is what we've been lacking since 2016. I think that the prior one ran out then. So that really needs to be done. And then we'll have a much clearer path forward that all of these projects can fall under that plan. But I think some of you mentioned finding out what it would cost to, and really finding out how dire the situation is from the staff and student perspective and family perspective, like Audrey was saying. That's important to me. So I hope that that's clear enough information for the superintendent.
Is this timeline acceptable then for the facility study? November
and December of this year.
You're wanting to understand it, accelerate the Aspire moving is what we want to do. And try and rush it to 22-23 school year.
So that was the original timeline that we presented.
That was the original, so we're trying to move it.
And so when
When
we researched as to could it be sooner, again, as we were speaking before, because of the current projects in queue, I really don't think so. I would think it would be a better timeline to finish those projects next summer and then start this project.
Yes.
So my answer or my response to reviewing and researching is that I think the timeline is right for the program to be able to move in 22-23. But that doesn't mean that we still don't move forward with the facility study next semester and allow the community to give us some input on what projects should rise to the top in terms of AC, in terms of schools, in terms of any other component. So really it's kind of it's two pieces moving along at the same time. And I really feel like the Coolidge building itself could be fleshed out through that facilities committee.
And I agree. I don't see any need to accelerate.
I would agree.
2022-23 and get the facilities plan done quicker.
I think it is my opinion that I think we are confusing construction with planning. I think planning needs to start phase one of the planning should begin ASAP. I mean, it should be as soon as possible. I think there needs to be drawings done, like real drawings done, kind of a cost analysis. I think
No, you're still on, Andy.
Okay, well, I got a new computer and I touched something and everything went away, sorry. But I think we are very much confusing construction phase with planning phase. I think planning phase needs to happen sooner rather than later. I mean, if we're not going to start planning until next summer, construction's not going to start in August.
I agree, Andy, in my mind that planning and that committee work would happen next semester, would begin in January, if you will, so that we would be ready to begin the work in August as soon as HVAC is completed. So your timeline that you have in mind is also would be the timeline that I would recommend.
And so that's consistent with moving the students in the 22-23 school year. Okay.
So just so I'm clear then, the timeline for the facility study for next semester is on point.
Yeah.
And the timeline for the proposed moving of the program to where the kids would actually begin the year, ideally at Moline High School in the renovated A wing of August 2022 is also on point. And then that the board is directing us to move forward with more formalized plan, more formalized cost analysis, and a committee of stakeholders to better define how those spaces could be best utilized from a program standpoint. So those three items, and is there anything else?
Yes.
On that?
Only one thing. Oh, please take it back to the other screen with the timeline. I get why we would start meeting in January. It's a seamless for those facilities committee. It's sort of, new year, new start. We get past the holidays, but forgive me if this sounds too blunt. Why do we need 2 months to put together a committee? Like, couldn't we start in December? We're not to November yet.
We could.
I mean, it buys 1 month, but given the fact that I hear what Dave is saying about internal capacity, maybe the 2-month window there was to help the internal capacity, but if there's any reason to wait, I don't see it on the outside here in terms of waiting 2 months to put a committee together or using.
We could have that first meeting in early December.
Yeah, that's the only thing I would suggest, I guess.
To piggyback onto Audrey, is we're having these committees, first, I want what Audrey had asked. I want families to be able to have a chance to say what their concerns are about the building. I want their feedback. But we make sure if we're doing a community member or people from different schools on this planning, that there's someone from the alternative perspective.
Are you speaking about the stakeholder committee that we would put together specifically for Coolidge and Aspire? Or are you speaking about the district facilities committee?
I'm talking about the district facilities committee. That way everyone is represented for the great picture of facilities.
I agree with Aaron. I think we need to be pretty deliberate about making sure we have a kind of a diverse representation on this committee.
So we have to
Diverse
be a stakeholder,
stakeholders.
a group of stakeholders specifically to better define and develop those renovated spaces in the A wing would absolutely involve folks associated with the current Coolidge program and the other committee as well.
Do you have what you need?
I think I do. Thank you very much.
Okay. So now we have, we get to bring forward the consent agenda. So I need a motion, the recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the items contained in consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
So move.
Do we have any discussion? Now we can vote. Yes, do we have any discussion? Okay. Roll call, please.
Waiver,
Aye.
Maria Estragera,
Aye.
Andrew Ware,
Aye.
Aaron Waldron Smith. Aye. Audrey Adamson,
Aye.
Justin Anderson,
Aye.
Sangeetha Rayapati.
Aye.
Okay, so now we move on to approval of waiver for school years 2021 through 2020, 2021 through 2024, 2025 for the use of the driving range for Moline-Coal Valley School Districts. So it's a recommended motion that the Board of Education. Sorry. Okay. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve a waiver for the Illinois School Code for the driver's education rule for the school years of 2020 through 2021. And then through 2024, 2025 for the use of the driving range for Moline-Coal Valley School District students.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, discussion.
So before moving forward to approve it, which is a great facility, great thing to be able to use, and I think it's what you mentioned, a very good thing to have. My question on that, this is the third school year in a row, I personally have a student learning to drive. The condition of driving on that seems to only be the same potholes bigger as when I learned on it 25 years ago. If we're gonna do this waiver and continue it, why in the world would we not bring it up to standards at the same time? Why would we let it continue to deteriorate another 5 years? What's it take? It wasn't in our parking lots because it's not parking lot, but we did all the other where we drive on school property areas. So if we approve this, I would like a very serious look at resurfacing that and make it to where when I take my students up there to practice driving, it does not cause me to need suspension parts, running alignments, and pop tires. I think having it in such a deteriorated state is completely worthless.
Good point, Justin.
That's a very good point, Justin. It was only if we had a 10-year facilities plan that could answer those questions.
So I would encourage, if we vote to extend this and ask for the waiver, and then it's granted so we can continue using it, that one of the very important things we look at is making it to where it's conducive to be used.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Maria Estragero.
Aye.
Andrew Ware.
Aye.
Aaron Waldron Smith.
Aye.
Audrey Adamson.
Aye.
Justin Anderson.
Aye.
Kate Schaefer.
Aye.
Sangeetha Raghavi.
Aye.
Okay, approve of e-learning. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the district's initial e-learning program for a term of 3 years.
Second.
Okay, do we have any discussion?
Yes.
Go, Sangeetha.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm, I'm sorry, I read it on Saturday, I believe, if you could refresh my memory. Having this approval or verification does not mean that every single time we may need to cancel for an emergency day that we use an e-learning day, correct?
You are correct.
Okay, thank you.
My question as well, and is that something though that we just do on a case-by-case basis based off of the circumstances of what that emergency day is and it just is correct? Because I'm thinking about both students and staff who need materials at home and don't have their Chromebooks because they.
There's a lot of moving parts to
Parts,
this
yeah.
with staff and students. You know, a good example might be like the polar vortex. You know,
Yeah.
something's coming up, it might be extended.
Yeah.
You know, if you're in a situation like that, the only reason we're doing it, there's no intent right now to utilize it. It opens a door for us, should the district choose, so it provides option.
Okay, great, thank you.
Do we have any feedback from staff and teachers on such a proposal?
So part of the proposal is that you have to end up bringing it forward to the collective bargaining group. So we discussed and put it in front of them with the intent that we had said before. And they understand that our intent is just for the action. And we work with them.
And this would not affect the current e-learning plan, it's just to add that possible emergency days could become e-learning days. Correct.
I would just say it's generally a positive thing when there's an extended, because whether particularly like if you're an AP student and you lose all that time. And we have had that lately in the last couple of years. We've had some shutdowns more than I want to say ever got closed for me. But, I think this can be a really positive thing.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Andrew Ware.
New computer, yes, I vote aye.
Aaron Waldron Smith.
Aye.
Audrey Adamson.
Aye.
Justin Anderson.
No.
Kate Schaefer.
Aye.
Maria Estragero.
Aye.
Sangeetha Raghavi.
Aye.
Okay, reports request, superintendent report.
Okay, we had a positive response today from the media during our open house for phase 1 of the PE facility. It's truly amazing and will benefit all Moline-Coal Valley students in the future. We anticipate phase 2 completion at the end of December. This phase includes the 4 courts, indoor track, and so on. And we will plan an official ribbon cutting upon completion of that entire project. For the return to learn update, I wanted to focus on how we are managing in terms of positive cases and the contact tracing process. It's no surprise that we are seeing an uptick in positive cases in our district, as our county and our region is seeing rising numbers as well. The contact tracing process is complex and has become a 7-day-a-week responsibility. And we're most grateful to our head nurse, Kim Nelson, and other nurses, such as Amber at the high school, for stepping up to lead this charge. That being said, it's not necessarily the workload itself of contact tracing that is becoming cumbersome. That part we are managing with the great people at the helm there. It's the results of the contact tracing process that are rising to a level of massive complexity. I wanted to address the tough decision to temporarily close Jane Addams for 2 weeks. These decisions are not taken lightly and come down to our commitment to student and staff safety as our #1 priority. This temporary closure was due to multiple cases that were able to be linked, indicating an outbreak. And we worked with the County Department of Health to make that decision. And I also wanted to thank Principal Landon for her leadership in that process. So this is another example similar to the temporary closure of Moline High School, where we're able to make an isolated decision to affect one impacted area in lieu of closing the entire district. And I remain committed to doing that as long as possible. As we are seeing an uptick in cases, it was staff cases that were driving the numbers for the past few weeks. But if we've learned anything, the situation is definitely fluid, and each week looks different than the week before. The website is up to date, citing 66 total cumulative cases since the start of the school year, 29 of which are from the last 14 days. The rising number is now not just linked to staff cases, but also student cases. And it's important to note that the contact tracing process is revealing that spread is occurring in a multitude of different ways. Some other items of note are that we are receiving varying responses from parents when their kids are identified through the contact tracing process. A growing number appear to be more reluctant to have their kids tested. And while we respect the decisions made by all of our parents, this could impede our ability to have accurate data regarding the positive cases in our district. And this could also be the result of new updates and changing guidance. IDPH and CDC put forth a number of new changes just as of last week. And in addition, the pediatric group in Moline reported that they were suspending rapid testing on kids. Lastly, the CDC most recently changed the definition of close contact from 15 minutes at one time to 15 minutes cumulatively over a 24-hour period. All of these details increase the complexity of this work. Lastly, regarding some additional changes to our protocols this week, we are coordinating with Rock Island County Department of Health to determine how our staff and student quarantine and reentry procedures will need to be changed based on this new guidance. And tomorrow, I plan to announce a district-wide mandate for all meetings to be held virtually, to be effective immediately through the end of December. There may be a few exceptions, such as a parent-requested in-person meeting, a requested in-person IEP or 504 meeting, a Board of Education meetings, and any other emergency need. This additional measure is being implemented to help us be able to maintain in-person learning as long as possible. Moving on, I wanted to share with the Board of Education our draft equity plan. As you know, we are, while we're focused on this work, we're not forgetting about our PACE goals. And we are constantly working on all of those goals. I wanted to introduce our newly formed, along with sharing the draft equity plan to get guidance from the board and ideas. We also wanted to talk about our newly formed District Equity Leadership Council. And as a reminder, this work is aligned to the PACE goal under P for People, which indicates that we'll launch a multi-year equity plan, including a staff PD initiative focused on equity and cultural competence. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to members of the curriculum department to share the pre-work that has been done and the plan moving forward to engage a committee of stakeholders through the Leadership Council. So, Mr. Ryerson, Dr. Bing.
The curriculum department, since the PACE goals ended up getting set by the Board of Education, we sat down and we drafted through what these might look like. It's one thing to end up taking goals, but then taking goals and looking at it through the lens of traction in application. And so we had several meetings, and then circling back around a couple times with our superintendent to go through to see what it would look like. We went through and we looked at other equity plans that districts use, and we meshed them together into a hybrid that fit nicely along, in our opinion, along with the board's case goals format. So you'll end up seeing that we have a column where we walk through a few pieces here. In particular, I'm going to talk about the first column with people. And just to let you know, this is our first time launching out. We thought when we initially met with Dr. Savage that we wanted to end up taking the PACE goals and be able to let's get some ideas out there, and then we need to be able to have people provide input into it. So this is, to say the word draft, we really need to make it in bold, exclamation mark, underline that. Because we are going to look to deploy a community of leaders to really look at this and help guide us in how we can end up really making these goals. So we're just trying to end up sifting down some PACE goals here. But in the people, we want to end up listing out our professional development. Currently, this is with the pandemic, it's difficult to do professional development, especially as Dr. Savage has said that some of the physical meetings are going to go away. It doesn't mean that we cannot still do professional development, but we have been engaging in a few things, and they're listed on there. The other part too is as an example, is being able to reach out to people in different groups, models and mentors. The Brothers Keepers Empowerment Program at Moline High School has started this year. It's been successful thus far, even though young. But it's a nice example of trying to end up getting as many people to be connected and have some of those mentors. We're also looking at some grow your own as far as the teaching field. Not only do we end up having a shortage of sons and teachers, but we also want to make sure that we are increasing our staff members and providing minority staff members as well to help reflect our student population. Mr. Rice will bring over the next part.
So under achievement, when we look at curriculum instruction and assessment, we want and need to be able to increase the percentage of our underserved population who are taking advanced courses at the high school, and to develop a pipeline of those students starting at the elementary. So ideas that we have brainstormed and talked about is one, at the elementary level, first looking at our data, but not just looking at our assessment data, but understanding our assessment data and being intentional in thinking about the biases, the cultural biases, social economic biases that come with that data, and understanding that students that may live like in poverty, if they're at a certain percentile, say 70th percentile, they still have the potential and may end up being gifted at the 70th percentile because of the hardships that they're facing with poverty, and using that data to not exclude them, but to include them. So getting intentional with that data piece and understanding the biases. The other thing that we need to look at doing is adopting a new assessment called the NNAT3, which is a nonverbal, non-biased, non-cultural biased assessment that we want to be able to give to all students at the elementary level that will help us identify those students who might have language barriers, EL, and so taking an additional data piece to identify those students, and then getting those students into our higher clusters and providing them not just with core, but more as well. The other thing we need to think about is that transitional piece as students move from 5th grade into 6th grade, where they start to take some of those advanced courses. And again, looking at our data, looking at that nonverbal data, looking at our MAP scores and understanding the cultural biases that come with that data, and making sure that those students have an opportunity to go into those advanced courses and possibly creating more sections for those students. So with the end result being that we have a continuous pipeline of our underserved populations moving into those advanced courses. The goal being that we want the percentage of demographic percentage to match the percentage of those students that are taking those advanced courses.
Leslie?
Yes, hi. Hello, everyone. It's Leslie Perkins. I'm going to talk to you about the next column there, which is community equity and engagement, which really discusses how we intend to reach out to our diverse community. First of all, by increasing that two-way communication, the opportunities for families, regardless of home language, utilizing the translation applications such as talking points, as well as the different languages offered through the Remind system that we have. Also by reducing or removing barriers for all stakeholders to have the ability to provide input at community conversations by holding them in different formats and even in different languages. The next one is by offering relevant information and support to parents and families in accessible ways. So the Parent University, offering that in multiple formats so that parents can kind of log in at their convenience. And facilitating the registration process for welcoming new families to our district while allowing for consistency and any necessary translation services through the brand new student intake center located at Allendale. So we're really trying to increase how we reach every family in our district.
All right, and I have environment, which is equity in physical and structural learning environment. And we've already actually started looking at some of our discipline data. This is work that building principals started doing last spring. So that work has begun looking at we're breaking our data down by a lot of our different subgroups and looking for trends and patterns there to see how we can best improve on how we're dealing with students and helping them. Number two there, the next one, we've already had a lot of talk about the strategic plan, as Dr. Savage mentioned, and I'm excited, and I know Dan is, to be part of that committee to really go through that and flush out our priorities. So that was a great discussion tonight to lead up to that. So excited about that. We are going to look at our board policies and just look them over in terms of how they read and make sure if there's any areas where we can improve upon those. And then, of course, the Aspire program with that Mr. Moore talked about and the benefits of that. We're excited about that. Just keep in mind, this whole thing is our framework. Okay, like Dr. DeBane mentioned, it's a framework to start. And the really neat thing about this that I think we're all excited about is that we're going to form our leadership committee of leaders. It's called CLEAR. And we're going to thank Dr. DeBane again on his acronym creation. It's Community Linking Equity, Achievement, and Resources. And our goal is to get these leaders together and vet through this and then bring this back and get your final input. So we are excited to have this. Thank you for allowing us to present tonight. Any questions?
Sorry, and you can just tell me to settle down. This is, I understand this is a task that I get excited about. So, yay on MTSS, huge fan. So I just wanted to ask a quick question. Are you saying that that is a way to make sure that students who might generally get underserved for enrichment get it now through the MTSS process?
Yeah, we're talking a lot about a pipeline, town pipeline.
Okay.
Developing, because especially like as there's a gap between being able to get students into advanced coursework and the preparation for it, it's the lack of preparation does not equate a lack of intelligence.
Exactly.
And so you basically have to look at, we talked about guidance and some scaffolding and supports to create success and create that talent.
Okay, and you may not, none of you may be able to answer this, but for number 7, under your curriculum, do you know what scale, how you are going to check for your diversity in materials? We're going to do an audit.
Yeah, so we did, when we ended up starting, when we implemented remodeling and we did classroom libraries and we increased materials, we did a reading audit there. And we specifically put in collections of books to be able to increase that. The time has gone by, and so this is a good opportunity to make sure that it's culturally accurate and the diversity that we do.
How do you do, I mean, like, I know how I do my audits, how do you guys do your audits? Like, to make sure that you are culturally diverse and hitting the different areas? I guess that's what I'm
Well,
getting.
when we did it before, we did it in partnership with Scholastic, who has an assessment tool for
Okay.
that. And then it really ended up relying on classroom teachers to be able to say, you know, these reflections that we have. And at the time, we were targeting specifically classroom textbooks because we either heard that it was adequate material or lacking diversity or both. So there are systems out there to be able to do
Yeah,
that.
I was just curious which one you're thinking. I will say that your library system that your librarians use does allow them to do this.
I just want to ask about the people part of it. The minority student leadership group, is that the same as the Quad City minority leadership?
Actually, would elect Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore's, I want to give Mr. Moore a shout out here because we've been using a variety of staff members to help us along the way before the PACE goals and this plan was presented. And Mr. Moore, representing the secondary, has done a lot to advise this. And he's one of the people to help start up and lead the Brother Keeper Empowerment Program.
That's what I want my next question. What is that?
My Brothers Keepers Empowerment Program is a offshoot of our Minority Leaders of Tomorrow Club. And it's students, it is a mentoring program for young Black male students. The goal, and really piloted by Mr. Adrian Ritchie, who has been a driving force with all of this and a necessary goad to all of us to keep this at the top of our attention. The goal is to have older students mentor younger students, and to have that so that there's increased support among students, and to show that the administration cares about their success and bring resources to bear on that as well.
That's great. When I worked with Adrian there, we were part of the Quad City Minority Club or what have you, so I was wondering who's doing the same one.
It's different than Quad City Scholars, yes.
As far as you said, there's going to be parents, like parent involvement with that as well in that group?
We had, yes, absolutely. We're trying to encourage through Carlos Johnson, who has worked with and will be working with our teachers. He was, through his recommendations and talking to us and Mr. Ritchie about getting parents involved as well, members of that organization. And so for that first event, parents were invited as well to look at that so that we can bring everyone to bear.
Does that only include the African-American boys, or what about the Hispanic boys? Is there any maybe future talks about that at all?
That's what we're hoping. In fact, we hope to see multiple offshoots of Minority Leaders of Tomorrow for different groups along those lines. So we're just hoping that this will just be kind of a spark that pilots many of those.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that, and this generation of students has a very complex identities that don't fit neatly into a few categories. And so, BIPOC is a term I've come across, biracial, indigenous, people of color, as a larger umbrella for us to use for people with complex identities. So I just encourage the district staff to keep looking in those ways as well while you're addressing the specific needs of different groups.
Lastly, I would add with our diverse reading materials, we were excited to have Amanda and Brett Carter join our Equity Leadership Council. They're the amazing community parents who had a drive to raise funds on social media for purchasing new diverse titles for kids in school. And so these amazing people raised thousands of dollars towards purchasing new books for schools. So we reached out to them just as leaders that are passionate, and they were excited to be a part of our Equity Council. So we're excited to get started with that work.
I have one other semi-quick question, and I'm happy for someone to just email me a response rather than trying to find it out tonight. But I'm encouraged to hear about the efforts to identify more students who should be in challenging tracks. I do think that it's one thing to identify them. It's another thing to in a parallel way offer curriculum in a style of differentiation that really reaches those multiple intelligences. So, the project-based learning that I feel like some people continue to want to see more of at different grade levels. I just wonder if anybody can get back to me on how is the curriculum going to also model or going to supply these newly identified students in a way that's really meaningful. And not just the newly identified, I guess anybody where are we at with the curricular changes as well?
One thing I would just say is we're starting to flesh out the process for one of the other PACE goals, and that is the creation of our talent development program for grades 3 through 5. And so what you spoke of just then in terms of differentiation and different modalities of instruction and curriculum will be a target for the talent development program. So the Naglieri assessment, the nonverbal assessment that Mr. Ryerson spoke of, looking to administer that across all of our third graders as an example, we'll really find those students, and then we're learning how they can receive different and additional instruction to help move them forward. So we know that there are curricular implications along with, teaching style implications, and that's a process we're working on.
Great, thank you.
This is a clarifying question, so I'm not putting my knowledge onto this. When I think of MTSS, which I do daily, it is everybody is getting what they need at a period of time in the building. So like, if you say we're studying Beaver, and you're proficient in that area, it doesn't necessarily mean that you stop studying that science area, but you are getting an in-depth, deeper, more independent study of it. And then on the other hand, there's the children who need the support to bring them up to proficiency. Is that what we're, the same thing that Moline is going forth with when we say MTSS?
Yeah, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
We're using map data right now and doing similar types of modes of instruction. So.
Thank you, because I think it's a good framework that I look forward to seeing how it drills down into very specific ways we can implement and actionable things, but it's exciting.
And then one last item on my report. We wanted to share a special teacher recognition with members of the board tonight. We were excited to learn that one of our very own was recognized by the Illinois State Board of Education. Along with announcing the Illinois Teacher of the Year, they also presented 233 other educators across the state with a very special Those Who Excel Award, citing meritorious service in their efforts to shape and inspire the next generation of teachers. And as far as we can find, I know we did some digging, this is a first for our district, so it's very exciting. We are very proud and would like to recognize our first grade teacher from Washington Elementary, Heidi Niels. So congratulations to Heidi. Is she on the call, Craig?
I am.
If you can have her.
Yes, I am here. Well, thank you. So I have to give kudos to you guys. If you were in my classroom right now, you would all deserve a brain break because you've been sitting there for 1 hour and 41 minutes and 47 seconds. So you guys are rock stars. You might need to spell some sight words with your body or something along those lines. But I just wanted to say that it's really an absolute honor to even be nominated for this award. A good teacher always makes you do something a little bit more than you thought you could do. And Dr. Pribble was that for me. He always pushed me to do a little bit more than what I was comfortable doing, which helped me to achieve more than I thought I could. I could talk for days about how the Moline School District is truly a great place to work. I could, but I won't. I won't go past that 1 hour and 42 minute mark for you. But I will tell you about the teachers that I am surrounded by. So famously, John Ron once said, "You're the average of the 5 people you spend most of your time with." Well, I spend most of my time with first graders. So, well, let me just tell you about the teachers that I spend my time with. They're inspiring. They're incredible. It makes sense that it's natural to strive for success when you're surrounded by successful people. So I just want to thank you for celebrating this award with me. I actually was kind of disappointed at first. I didn't win Teacher of the Year, and I was very disappointed that maybe I let Dr. Pribble down. And then in walks into my classroom, Dr. Savage, Dr. Pribble, my current principal, Mr. Price, and they just made me feel so special. They created a certificate and gave me this glass globe that my students thought was the coolest thing in the world. I mean, it was amazing. And it was just a lot of fun. Now, granted, I did have one little guy who ended up with a photographer's camera walking around taking photos in the classroom, which I was terrified, but she was gracious enough to allow him to use that really expensive camera and take a few photos. But thank you for celebrating with me and really just for making me feel very special.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, anything else that you have?
No.
Okay. Do we have any Board of Education members that have anything they want to talk about? Okay, Justin?
Question I had brought up a couple meetings ago, we heard a handful of times or so on the community conversation call last week, is still there's some students that are taking 6 to 8 hours a day, but the majority of teenagers and junior hires are getting done in an hour and a half to 2 hours, and we're supposed to be providing 5 hours of traceable education. I'd like to know, we've heard parents talk about that on the call. I've mentioned it, we've heard it before. I'd like to know, based on the questions that was posed to request an update on that soon, 2 board meetings later, what is our update?
Well, we did pass that feedback again along to principals so that they could drill down and work with their teachers and let them know that there's still many families looking for more. I know that we did some surveys at the elementary level, and now we're looking to do the same to get feedback for the secondary level. I know that at the secondary level, they just changed. So for the high school standpoint, they've added an additional course to now have 4. And so I think, and I'll let others join in, but I believe the teachers wanted to see how students responded to that 4th class. And if that in fact tipped the scales as far as kids needing more or less time. And in addition, we're working on more enrichment curriculum to make that available for families that need it. You know, we're really trying to shoot down the middle because we do have kids working at all different kinds of paces. You know, one kid gets done in an hour and a half and another kid's at the table for 6 hours working on one task. So it's difficult to gauge down to the exact minute because kids take different amounts of times to study, different amounts of time to read, and so on. So really, you know, the State Board of Education is still encouraging us to focus on the less is more and not drive too much, not stick to the same scope and sequence because of the remote learning and, you know, the on again, off again type scheduling. So I don't know that it'll ever be a perfect science, but I know that they're still working at trying to provide more for who need it, less for who doesn't. So we're working on that, but it's valid.
I appreciate that, and I fully understand, even in a full classroom setting where everybody's present, there's gonna be some done in 10 minutes and somebody the whole 45-ish. I understand that.
If anything,
But another big
independent learning.
discrepancy that we had heard before was
Right.
was not mentioned on the conversation call from parents last week, but we've seen it and heard it before, is some elementary ones, they've all got it as a 5-hour timer on their computer screen. They have to be active on that for 5 hours. And then you have others who are done in 90 minutes and maybe they did something, maybe they did. That's extreme discrepancy.
Right.
That's not anywhere near down the middle A.
I would say
That's a big deal.
Right.
That if we're gonna have that for one, and we're looking for equity across the board in all areas, we either need a 5-hour timer for everyone or no.
well, I would say no timer. I do not
That's fine,
think
I'm not
that that's,
advocating for it, I'm
Right.
advocating for equal.
right. I don't think that's the intent of the state superintendent. The timer, I think, is extreme, and maybe it's there as an option for some kids or some parents. But again, trying to find the balance between direct instruction and the time it takes for students to complete academic tasks, those together should equal 5 hours, and therein lies the variance. So I know that there were some teachers using a timer. That would not be my recommendation, and I don't believe that, as we've navigated heavy into second quarter, that's still happening. But I agree, I know that was happening in the beginning, and that really created an opportunity for us to, trial and error and adjust based on what we're learning is working better. And so I know that there was a timer out there some were using, but I think, it just doesn't work for every kid, especially if it's not just direct instruction. In fact, we've got parents saying, just give me the websites and I'll figure out the time that I want my kid on there. I mean, we heard that in the last community conversation, a parent saying, don't say I need to do 40 minutes of Imagine Learning or 20 minutes of ST Math. Give me the website and I'll be the teacher and gauge that time for my kids. So we have that happening too, as parents really stepping up and being that teacher. So it is, I don't even want to call it a happy medium because I think it's a big old unhappy medium. It's shooting down the middle, and then families are finding where and how they can individually adjust. But point taken on the enrichment, we still need to get better in providing more of that to our families.
Did we get an answer from Springfield on the request to check with the state board or the legislature on if we can't verify, and we do know for a fact a lot of these kids are getting done in 90 minutes. We didn't offer them a 5-hour day. Do they get credit for it?
There's no verification process. If we get called to some sort of verification process, it would come down to instructional materials. We're still waiting on whether or not the feds are going to change their mind on spring assessments. And so I know teachers are moving forward trying to get that content in, but as far as I know, there is no verification process because it's a 5-hour, what's the word? It's a 5-hour recommended time. It just looks different for different kids. So we're not being asked to submit reports, if you will, spreadsheets, if you will. That's the target, and that's what we're shooting for. It just looks different, and that's problematic. I get it.
I'll follow up on that very soon.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I did have one question, just wondered what we had decided on the student board member. Do we know what?
I posed a question to the Board of Education. I'm not sure about any feedback, so please let me know. I know Principal Sanders had a senior and a sophomore that had navigated the leadership process. And so what I would like to be able to bring back to her is how would you like to proceed with one or both? And what would that look like?
I think it gets very difficult to have more than one person to coordinate with. So my feedback on that would be to proceed with one.
Thank you.
Do you have a preference?
I do think though there's some value of having a couple of different age perspectives if possible and that leadership opportunity earlier. So if we can have a rotation and people spend more than 1 year in that role even. So even if it started with a senior and a sophomore this year in that role, the senior graduates and then we select another sophomore the next year and we have 2 people in the 2 different age things, or it depends on how long we want that commitment to be. But I think there could be some value in those perspectives and voices as well. Although it could take different levels of coordination to possibly work with.
I think we have to check the board policy as well, because it does talk, it just says a student board member. It doesn't give us any more detail in terms of guidance for that.
Because,
Right, because I know my friend, they have two students.
but I believe ours, we wrote it to say just one.
Right, that's what I said, you know, yeah.
You have to rewrite that one.
Yeah. We know they do have to. So did you have a preference?
Personally, I mean, I would rather have a younger one, only because the older ones tend to be more busy. And we ran into that with the other one not being here for a good majority of the meeting, so that's just my thought. Erin?
I understand we wrote our board policy as one, but I like the different perspective. Even if, and I understand the coordination, I understand their own policy, but even if there was some kind of rotation, I like the idea of different age perspectives. So do I.
Well, Clark, we can email or the thoughts if they come across. Okay. If they come across. Right, so I need a motion to adjourn.
So good.
Have a roll call.
Karen Walden. Aye. Margaret Anderson.
Aye.
Justin Anderson.
Aye.
Kate Schaefer. Aye. Maria Esposito.
Aye.
Andrew Ware.
Aye.
Thank you, Red Honey.
Aye.
See you in 2 weeks.